Good morning, Year 6. Today we're thinking within our English lesson about how we can ensure that dialogue progresses a story and how we can then punctuate it and develop dialogue. To be successful within our dialogue lesson today, where we're writing a passage of dialogue, we need to understand the events that we want to include in the dialogue. So whatever we want to happen needs to happen. We need to remember those rules of dialogue that we were looking at earlier in the week, where we use inverted commas to wrap around the direct speech. We use the reporting clause, and we're going to try and amend the verbs that we utilize with that. We make sure that a comma precedes the final inverted commas. We make sure that a new speaker starts a new line. Okay, so remember those lessons earlier in the week about the rules of dialogue. But beyond the rules for dialogue, we always need to understand that there are conventions for dialogue, conventions for speech. When we're speaking, or when a character is speaking, they don't always speak in the same way that other interactions, such as a formal letter or a persuasive advert, might appear. Right, guys. First of all, and this is in blue on your section that was printed today, you've got some sections. Now, some of you will have spotted that number 4 is incorrectly written on the screen. It shouldn't say nag, it should say Rikki. Okay, and that might give you a clue about whether or not this is true or false. So what I'd like you to think about with these 4 statements, are they true or are they false? So pause the script, pause the video while you decide, looking at your story that you read yesterday, Rikki-Tikki-Tavi, is this true or is it false? That Nag goes to the bedroom first, then go through each of these 4 to identify if they're true or false. Pause the video now, please. Okay, looking through now, we can see that the first one is false. It is initially the bathroom rather than the bedroom that Nag enters the house. The second one is true because Nag's mate was Naganya. The third one is also false, as with the first one, because the battle with Rikki and Naganya is not seen. We don't see that battle down underneath the ground. And finally, it shouldn't say Nag, it should say Rikki, and Rikki does guard the garden at the end of the story. So that recall completed. Now we can think about the vocabulary in an element of the story. If we look at the word veranda, it's spelt slightly differently in the text. So if we look at the text here, we can see that veranda has a H in. Okay, so the context of the passage that we've got is that they gave him a little piece of raw meat. Rikki-Tikki liked it immensely, and when it was finished, he went out into the veranda and sat in the sunshine and fluffed up his fur to make it dry in the roots. Then he felt better. So that's the context. That's the piece of writing that Rudyard Kipling gave us. But we're now wondering what might veranda mean. Now, if we look through this, what I've done is I've completed elements of one of these grids for the vocabulary piece of veranda, but I've completed it with 2 options. So looking through the context, if you go out onto the veranda, do I think that's a cooking area for young people? Or do I think it's a platform outside of a house? I think probably outside of a house. Okay, I think I've got to look there. It's a roof platform outside of a house because I go out into it and I sit in the sunshine. Okay, here then, if it's a place where people go out into, is it going to be a car where I think people go into, or is it going to be a terrace? I can see that the synonym that's correct there is a terrace. If I know that the synonym is a terrace, then what would be a sensible opposite word? Somewhere I can go out onto. Now, would that be a pigeon or would it be a cellar? I always think of cellars as a place you go under a house, so it should be a cellar. Okay, so that's the antonym, the opposite meaning. So here I've got 2 sentences, both of which reference somebody going and sitting where a veranda is. So do you go and sit on your veranda or in your veranda? And here we sit on a veranda. Okay, on a veranda. Okay, you go onto the veranda or into the veranda, but you sit on it. It's normally one where the preposition will be on. Okay, so the preposition is on the veranda. Okay, so just a bit of a look at the use of the word veranda. Maybe some of you writing today can feature the language, that noun of veranda. Okay, so it's a place someone sits on. Okay, guys, looking through developing dialogue then. Now, if we look at this piece of written dialogue, don't be frightened, Teddy, said his father. And that's his way of making friends. Ouch, he's tickling under my chin, said Teddy. Okay, think about what you notice about these words. Don't, that, and he's. Pause the video if you need to. Lots of you spotting those apostrophes which show us their contractions. Why do we use contractions where 2 words are put together? Why do we do that in dialogue, in speech? If you're thinking and you're responding, great stuff. It's basically what we normally do. We would not say, do not be frightened, Teddy. That is his way of making friends. He is tickling. It sounds too formal. It doesn't sound appropriate. It doesn't sound how we'd have a conversation. Our conversations might be different if we're speaking to different people. For example, if you're speaking to somebody of great import, such as an MP, a prime minister, a head teacher, you might speak differently to how you might speak to your friends. But normally in dialogue, we do utilize contractions. We also sometimes use an exclamation. Ouch! We show how somebody's feeling by using these exclamations, these short singular words with an exclamation mark at the end of them. Okay, our speech shows sometimes this emotion, surprise, pain, anger, delight, all these different emotions we must show within our speech. Okay, so we tend not to use standard or formal English language sometimes in direct speech. Sometimes the rules of accepted language are different when we're using spoken language. Okay, so rather than ouch, a more formal word combination would be, I am rather surprised and experiencing some pain at this moment, which doesn't sound like something that anybody really, maybe apart from a silly teacher, would say. Okay, so think about that when you're putting your piece of writing together, more informal language. My cousin Chua the rat told me, said Chuchunda, and then he stopped. Told you what? Shh, Nag is everywhere, Rikki-Tikki. You should have talked to Chua in the garden. I didn't, so you must tell me. Quick, Chuchunda, or I'll bite you. So it's normally this informal language, okay? Sometimes we don't finish a sentence. That's the same as when we're having a dialogue with our friends. We don't always have a full stop at the end of each sentence. Sometimes we also see that there's quite short sentences. Quick, Chuchunda, or I'll bite you. Okay, so we've got these quick, speedy sentences, which we include in dialogue as well. Okay, so less formal punctuation, some dashes sometimes to break up the element of a sentence rather than that formal use of formal punctuation. Okay, so tractions for smooth sounding rhythm, exclamations, shorter sentences, informal language, sentence structure, and informal punctuation. So there's different features within these conventions of dialogue. Now, when you're going to do it, it needs to sound authentic, needs to sound real, and that's what you've got to try and do today. If we have a look at this piece of dialogue, we can see that Mike's in a bit of a battle with the dog. I am feeling rather cross at this moment. Why will you not accompany me into the veterinary practice? We cannot be late again, as we will miss our appointment. Now, unless that's a very pompous, a very well-bred dog, that conversation that Mike's having with the dog doesn't sound realistic. So what I'd like you to think about as your first task today is, could you rewrite what Mike's saying? Use those rules of direct speech where we've got inverted commas in the correct space, we've got those reporting clauses, and we've got those commas in the correct place. But also try and make it like a real conversation between a man, Mike, and his dog who's not doing what he should do. I don't know if that dog would hear, will you not accompany me into the veterinary practice? I don't think that's a conversation that sounds real. So try and make it into a real conversation, please. Second task, then we've got Mike and we've got, sorry, my screen's just slightly blocking Amy. Mike and Amy. So here, their dialogue at the moment says, would you be kind enough to assist me? I feel that I'm about to fall. A very formal, very pompous conversation again. I'm not convinced Mike would say that. I think Mike might say something that's a bit more contracted, a bit shorter, and might utilize some more informal facets of speech. So I'd like you to rewrite this conversation. It could be a conversation here because Amy and Mike could both speak. Whereas with our first one with Mike, unless you've got a very clever dog, I doubt that it will respond with anything other than a woof or a bark. Okay. Right, guys. What we're going to do today is we're going to plan our main task. So you've done those two little elements of dialogue. You're going to plan and write a passage of dialogue based on an element of the Jungle Book. Here we've got a piece of the Jungle Book that you read yesterday. So part of the text that you were looking at yesterday. It's a part of Rikki-Tikki-Tavi. You see at the bottom there, it's highlighted. They gave him a little piece of raw meat. Rikki-Tikki liked it immensely, and when it was finished, he went out onto the veranda and sat in the sunshine and fluffed up his fur to make it dry to the roots. Then he felt better. Now, your task today is doing what I'm about to do, where you invent a piece of dialogue. So you pretend that a conversation then took place between one of the characters and either another animal character or a human. So you invent a piece of dialogue. Okay, and here's our piece of dialogue. Wow! So that's that shortened version of speech. Wow! Rikki-Tikki exclaimed as he licked his face. Now, this is something with the ears licked his face that I'd like lots of you to be doing, where you're putting the action in as well as the dialogue itself. Rikki-Tikki exclaimed as he licked his face. That was amazing! We've got a lowercase t for that because of the fact that the reporting clause intersects, so breaks up the direct speech. Wow, Rikki-Tikki exclaimed as he licked his feet. That was amazing. Welcome, my darling. Ooh, hold on. I'm thinking there's a problem there. Pause your video while you spot the problem. Lots of you spotting that should not be on the same line. It's got new speaker, new line. So we should go, "You're welcome, my darling," responded Teddy's mother. Sounds a bit strange. However, sometimes responded could just about work. Although if I were rewriting this, I might think maybe I'll change my verb. But she says this quite pompously and then falls over. Before falling over, shocked at what had just occurred and screaming, "Ah!" And now you're all noticing, I know Fatima is, and I know Axa Farouk is, that there's a problem on this line. Well done for correcting it. We need those inverted commas. Again, though, lowercase a, because of the fact that we are carrying on a piece of direct speech which has been separated by the reporting clause. "You're welcome, my darling," responded Teddy's mother before falling over, shocked at what had just occurred. "Ah!" Scampering quickly away, Rikki-Tikki could be heard apologising about the shock he had been caused. Why had he caused shock, do you think? Yeah, you're right. He's a mongoose and he's talking. So that's a bit weird, isn't it? Therefore, she's a bit shocked. Teddy's mother's shocked. Scampering quickly away, Rikki-Tikki could be heard apologising about the shock he had caused. "I'd never wish this to upset you." I'd, okay, that contraction. "I'd never wish this to upset you," comma before the inverted commas. "I'd never wish this to upset you," he said, using the adverb sheepishly whilst hiding behind. Now, said isn't great as a speech verb. However, the adverb affects the verb, and therefore sheepishly is showing me that he's quite nervous. Okay, and he's hiding behind. Now, these different facets, we've got verbs such as explained here. We've got the idea of a new speaker, new line. We've also got you are, your contractions. We've got those inverted commas correctly used and a lowercase opening element when we're starting the part of a direct speech that follows a reporting clause. After the first part of direct speech has been before the reporting clause. We've also got verbs to open sentences. We've got adverbs to affect verbs. And we've got sometimes prepositional phrase, so hiding behind, that can show what's going on within the dialogue as well. So I like all this action that's going on. What you're going to do then is you're going to look through Rikki-Tikki-Tavi again. You're going to pick an event from within the story. You're going to invent and make up a conversation which could have taken place. Write this out, use the conventions and skills of the dialogue that we've demonstrated today, and then you're going to complete that on the lined grid that's under there. I can't wait to see those guys. A good piece of dialogue writing. Try and fill up that space. Think of some really interesting actions and verbs and adverbs to utilize. I really do look forward to seeing that. Thank you for your efforts today, Year 6, and I'll see you soon.